Okay, well, let's jump then to the canons. I know for some Synod Council members, for example, you may have seen some of this before, but we're really looking now to discuss the process. So canons can only be changed by an act of synod, right? That is fundamental to the way that our model works. As the Chancellor spoke last year at Synod, we have with an impending event where the provincial government, because of abuse and some cases of fraud, they have taken the not-for-profit side and they have changed the legislation to drive up accountability, right? And we see more of that. Those that are involved in cemeteries, and you've seen the Bereavement of Authority of Ontario come out with a demand for a sworn that you're taking care of trust funds. And that happens, by the way, folks, because there were people out there that they have investigated that were saying those trust funds are earning 3% and they're being charged a 5% fee. So what's happening on those perpetual care funds is every year they're going down by 2%. And eventually, when you've purchased in trust for perpetual care maintenance on a plot, and they've unturned that. So when that happens, of course, they go out and they say we have to protect, and they now implement. And so, and for those that are curious about that, the CFO John Secker has sent out a letter about that. But that's something else that, again, to think through. But again, the not-for-profit legislation changes the province is making force you to either have a clear path from your own constitution and your own bylaws, or they say here's what you must conform to. And when the provincial chancellors came together and looked at that, they said, "Ooh, that doesn't work in our model." So what they negotiated with the province is, provided that when they implement this, our canons are compliant in a given diocese, then they will say, we will let your canons and constitution rule, and not the provincial requirements. That's created a number of things. For example, with this diocese, we have not had a constitution. We have letters patent, but we've not actually had a prescribed constitution. That has been done. And the canons, what we've done basically is the Diocese of Toronto has good lawyers. They have deeper pockets, and they have done a lot of work in the last number of years getting the canon structured so they're compliant. So rather than us try to go to spend money and time and energy, what we have agreed to, as some other dioceses have, is that we're going to use the framework Toronto's built to help get us compliant. So that work began with a draft set of changes that were presented at Synod last year. And Synod passed a motion that approved those as draft. And there was two pieces to it, where there is a conflict in the existing canons and the draft canons. The existing canons will always take precedence. But the second part is where there's other areas that aren't, that we would use that as policy. And we are working that through, where there's a number of areas that we're exploring that we're using those as that new template to test drive them. But at the same time, there's the work that the Canons and Governance Committee, which is chaired by the Chancellor, and that committee brought that set of drafts together. We have been working through since the middle of this year on internal changes, getting at the things we can see, things that we know about that we're working through. Starting next month, we want to enter into a dialogue process. And we've decided that we want to do this in what we call SIGs, special interest groups. And that process now goes out and says, let's now take out to the various groups and elements of the diocese. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is a special interest group? Oops, pardon my line as I quite get that edited quite right. But this lists the ones that we have identified. And of course, for this to happen, we've each member of the Canons and Governance Committee to take primeship to go and be the interface into a group. So they will go to that group and then bring back the input. So I'll walk them through for clarity because I think this is very important. So for the clergy, it's Wayne. For the wardens, it's Roy. For the treasurers, it'll be myself. Lay delegates will be Ken Healy. Synod council is the chancellor, Roy. Lay readers, Wayne. Finance and audit will be myself. Training and development, and we're going to need to fill this slot because, of course, Christine Downey's going to be, but we have had someone else tentatively volunteer to join the committee, so we're going to see. Worship committee was also Christine. High Endo Ministries, myself. Archives, myself. Stewardship Congregational Development, Wayne. Green Group, Wayne. And the ACW, Wayne. So the intent is that those primes go to those groups, facilitate the conversation, and then bring the input back to canons and governance. Nope, you're correct. We are missing doors. May have even missed a window. Sorry. Got a little bit of levity. Let me just make a note here on my. Anybody see any other groups we have missed? Philip?
On a different dimension, congregations. Philip Berry again. In a how can I put this? A different lateral dimension, apart from special interest groups. I think discussions are necessary at the congregational level. We haven't done it yet because we haven't quite figured out how. And my very linear mind tells me that there's a need to be able to look at the new canons and compare them to the old ones and look for foundations and reasoning and why are we doing it this way. And for any one of us amateurs to look at that medium thick document and try to connect the strings that go from one new canon to several old ones and vice versa is a challenge. But I think there have to be discussions at the congregational level. Frankly, I have no idea how many people in the congregation I belong to really want to get into it, but it has to be available to them because ultimately those are the people who, in a manner of speaking, are responsible for those canons.
And we have had that discussion, right? And of course, recognizing that canons and one of the efforts we're trying to take is let's try and simplify them. We get things in canons that cover minutia process, and those things are better done outside the canon with a policy or a practice. So we're trying to simplify them, but you still get a level of legalese. You get a level of, and there's 40 odd canons with 100 odd pages. And so so how do we do that without basically saying the congregation's going to have a short break for lunch, and then by the time you're half an hour into it, you're having a nap. So and so that was the discussion. And I guess the question is whether we try to do that at the congregational level, because there will be, if there's 100 people in the church, how many want to engage in that discussion? It might be 8 or 10. Maybe specific canons for specific. So we've also talked about trying to do that at the regional level. Now, I think, again, the wardens in a parish can choose to turn, and the lay delegates who will come to synod to vote. I think, then again, that part of that piece will be, they carry that back to their parish that they represent. And then hopefully we also get a cross section because the ACW everybody on this list comes from a parish. But parishes that want to engage in it, again, we will find a way to support that. So when that process is done somewhere towards the end of February, we then need to take the work of starting to rewrite and edit. Good Lord, deliver us. Once those are done, we have a draft that will then come back out to consultation sessions, right? That will come out to general consultations, could be regional, could be at the congregational level for those that parish that has passion for it. That's intended through the month of April and May. In May, Synod Council will dedicate a significant amount of time in review to take them again. So when we hit the end of May, we've got another cycle of rewrite and edit, which we will do over the summer. We will then put them up and bring them back in September, because for them to be process-wise, they need to go out as part of the pre-Synod package. So that package goes out a month ahead of time. Synod is already booked for the first week of November 2018. So we need that final draft approved to Synod Council so it can go out, be part of the regional, be part of the pre-Synod meetings, and then finally come to Synod 2018 for approval.
Nancy McLeod from Leeds Anglican Ministries. When the Chancellor spoke about this at the Spring Wardens and Treasurers meeting, he indicated, and as the timeline shows, that there has already been some rewrite and edit that has occurred. What are we looking at in terms of that getting posted on the website or circulated in some way so that the special interest groups and others who are interested can be working from the most current draft in terms of providing feedback? We
had quite the lively discussion at the last Canons meeting about that, because part of it you now get into, oh, I'm sorry, Philip, your question, but that pertained to version 6.3, and we're now on version 7.4. And so what we have done is that we are tracking our changes, or tracking our inputs and pieces, but not updating the document to the last piece, right? Because simply you can't control the number of pieces around it. So what we want to do is get all the inputs in and then make the change, look at everything that was been recommended around a given canon, and then change it once. And then that'll be going back out for more consultation and et cetera. But the idea was, let's get that input in, and then that version control piece can happen in the next cycle. You should be using the document that was approved at Synod at this point.
Trish Miller again. Just following on to what Philip had talked about, is there any opportunity for using the regional councils as a special interest group ×3 during the consultation? Would love to. If the regional council if that's something the regional council wants to put time into, I think that's a fine use for that forum. I think the discussion there would be, where do you want to focus? Because there's the Constitution plus 40 odd canons that can get, where do you want to focus? It can be overwhelming. Trust me. Yeah, well, and that is one that, again, we look at some of those things and go, yeah, I mean, the canon as it's written calls for a parish advisory board. Then there's an executive, which in most of our parishes is just a wacky thought, right? That works fine in larger church, in large congregations and some of the other places, but for the most part. So we've already talked, but then the question is, how do you best call that down? Right? Is how do you bring that down? Do you need that role? Do we just need to make it work a different way? And that's some of the dialogue that's got to happen. And that's, again, the warden should be feeding some of that back. So that process, and again, I would say we get out of this, we being the general broad we get out of it what we put into it, right? And some I know will wait for Synod and say, well, there's the new document, and yes, I quickly read it. But I think we will get out of it. Our canons will be as good as we make them. So we're starting to wind towards time. This is one that if I kind of just speak to this as we go, the reality for the 2018 budget
is that the 2018 budget is not significantly different. Uh-oh, I just got a text from Mark Hauser that he lost us. Can others on the bridge hear us?
Yes.
You're back.
Oh, we got you.
Yes.
Did anybody else lose us or just the Trenton folk?
You're back, Alex. Can you hear us?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear us?
Okay, good. Yeah, we lost you for about 7 or 10 seconds there.
Okay. Did that happen elsewhere on the bridge or was just Trenton?
I think just Trenton.
Okay. Good to know. So the short version of the 2018 budget is that the number of levers is somewhat limited. And so among other things, CMM rates only change at Synod. And so the top line is for this budget is basically set. The numbers of inputs that have come in, there's always shifts, and of course, John Sucker does a great job of managing the pieces around what we call the mechanical parts. Looking at what's the cost of living increases, what's inflation going to do, where's housing, all those things. John does that research, and that rolls into, as this also builds out into our parish financial, the guidelines that go out. That process, we've had input from groups, as we always do. Some move through, but for the most part, there is nothing dramatic this year in terms of the cycle of change. There's now discussions around, we've heard some comment around the covenant group, and we've had great success seeding. I think Tracy mentioned that, some pieces there. Many parishes have been touched by, I think we're up to around, this is the third year, I think, of this. So there's like $20,000 been distributed to seed these things. The question has come up this year, is that money best managed through the regional councils? Do we look at supporting that work through regional councils rather than another way? That there's pieces like that, but overall, our target is still mandated to be a balanced budget. And while we're always working between, and I'll talk to some of the challenges and the pieces, but there's areas like Camp Hyanto that are still open. There's been a great deal of discussion over Hyanto the last number of years, but Synod Council will be making a decision the end of next Tuesday regarding is Hyanto going to run in 2018 or not. They're right now in the draft budget, there's $25,000 to support Hyanto. And the board is coming back to Synod Council to present. Obviously, if Hyanto operates, that's there. If it doesn't, it moves. The book room, we continue to align the book room. One of the great things in this location is the book rooms, as you can see, and if anybody hasn't been in it, I can flip the light back on at the end of the session. But you can actually get around in the book room. We have a large number of new people pretty well every day finding the book room, but we still are building that model out to try and make that more sustainable. We continue to shift parish ministry models. More and more parishes that are looking at some form, whether it's regional ministry, whether it's shared ministry, whether it's some of the models we've deployed that continue to shift to meet the needs. We see parishes that are moving well financially, and there's others that are struggling. And so how do we continue to align to support that? But in essence, there is not a dramatic shift in anything in the 2018 budget. We have continued to try and move money more to support program, and the office that Wayne now holds and working programmatic things through, supporting that, assisting with the clergy, assisting those pieces, trying to take that out of the maintenance parts and drive more programmatic. But there's not a ton of change in the 2018 budget. So one of the questions is, what do you think? One of the beauties of this bill, we brought with us the old Bishop Evans's clock. It now runs. It's actually ticking quite well. It's right behind me, and what I can hear is that tick tock. And that's one of the things I love in a conference room is tick tock, tick tock. Different than crickets. Sorry, Wayne, Bill, the venerable Archdeacon of all Frontenac.
Well, just tonight, it's just Bill Clark for St. Thomas's. Excuse me, Alex, I see a line there that you haven't really addressed. That's reduced staff.
Yep.
Could you care to elaborate on that a wee bit? Because
sure,
I don't see reduced staff.
Well, actually, we have reduced the staff. We've actually reduced several staff. So we formerly had a full-time Hyanto person on staff, on the diocesan staff. That position ended. We have an archival technician receptionist, and that role is not there now. So we have reduced staff. We have continued to shift with things like screening in faith, that is a part-time, and with Canon David Smith's departure, we're looking at a contract role to do that. We're looking, with doors. We have with Deborah's unfortunate and tragic passing, we've re-engaged, and we have Mimi now in place with the doors group to be able to facilitate and aid that. So we've put contractors in place to try and deal with some of the programmatic things. But we have, over the last number of years, reduced the number of staff, full-time paid staff. Yep. And we've moved the office to help facilitate a smaller team with a reduced number of people to drive collaboration, to drive openness. It's part of the concept of this building. Quiet on the bridge.
What kind of input are you looking for?
Oh, let's move on.
Basically, just questions, comment, input, feedback. Fair enough. And I think, one of the things that I can say is that I'm quite comfortable that we look at the stewardship of what we have to try and drive the maximum out of. CMM discussion will come the next topic, but I think, and that obviously is a link to that, the diocesan budget is a matter of the pie. The CMM is how it gets split up. And but I can say that we are trying to drive as much as we can. And as we talk about technology and infrastructure and everything else, trying to make sure we get the maximum benefit for the work of the diocese, which is building the kingdom. It is the mission we do. We want as much as we can to focus on that.
Philip Berry, yet again, and I'm sure a lot of people here have heard me on this topic before. Disciples, for the most part, are made, in terms of this diocese or most others, are made out there, not necessarily within congregations, but around them. And I'm not attacking any particular number in this coming budget, except to say that the more that can be put into local outreach, which is really the way we in our little towns make disciples or help disciples make themselves, the more that can be done in that direction, the better. Tracy has mentioned some efforts we're making in our parish, and it's happening in a lot of places. And I can only applaud it as a bystander, because I don't contribute much myself. It is something that is well worth doing, and the more support, whether money or some other support, the diocese can give to it, I think that should be regarded as a high priority.
Understood. Thank you. It does kind of feed us, and I'm conscious of time, but it does kind of feed us into the second part of the discussion, which I think is because as we've tried to work our way through, and as Philip mentioned, the last couple of synods, there has been discussion around and motions around reducing. And coming out of that, the bishop directed Synod Council and the Finance Committee to look at the situation and review, propose alternatives. One of the things that the discussion quickly led to was, what are we trying to do? Right? What are we, because we get caught up in the numbers, we get caught up in the pie, and when you're actually trying to say, how do you actually distribute the pie? And more importantly, what are you actually trying to do with CMM? And the old answer has always been, well, we're paying for the diocesan expenses, but at the end of the day, it's how do we separate this out so we can have a discussion and we can actually drive to a clarity and some objectives around each piece of it, because the size of the pie is a different discussion than how the pie is distributed and what the objectives of that. And one of the things you quickly find is that the objectives can be in conflict with each other. Let me now talk to that. For those that are on Facebook, I'm sure many of you have seen this out there. It talks about equality versus equity. And you can transpose this onto a wide range of topics. But for tonight, I'd like us to focus on how we distribute our and share our costs and investments in our mutual ministry. The first one on the very left-hand side talks about equal, that we treat everyone equally. So all three of those folks have the same size box. The fence is the same height, and you can see the result. I would argue that that's really how we deal with CMM today. That it's a mathematical calculation, and it's the same for everyone. You take a couple of things out, multiply by a percentage, and there's where you are. And it matters not whether it's a struggling parish, it's a large parish, small parish, financially well-off parish, mission-focused parish, inwardly focused parish, thriving, dying, doesn't matter. We treat it the same. The second one in the middle talks about making it possible for everyone to have equal access. So the characterization now, you see the taller person doesn't have a box. The middle one didn't need any more, and the shorter person got two. So you've taken from one and moved to the other. So everyone has the same outcome, and that's treating it equitably. The third image changes the game. And it says, I don't need to worry about boxes because I've removed the barriers. And so I've just put that up in terms of a bit of a thought process, because as we now look at, and we came up with 4 objectives. Now, I've left space for a 5th one because this is part of what the consultation is. But I'll just quickly present 4 that were defined by finance and then discussed at Synod Council. And I'm not going to read the definition, but the first one was assist struggling parishes. Right? So the parishes that are struggling financially is to have your system. We propose something like a graduated system, right? Where smaller parishes pay percentage less, or those that can afford it pay less, but increase, for example, or alternatively keep a flat rate, but have a floor level that before you get over that, there isn't any. So there's a variety of things there that says focus the objective on assisting parishes that are going through a difficult time. The second one is really about equity. It's saying everyone is treated the same. And that's really the model we have today, right? With we allow exemptions for things like capital, but it's a flat rate. The Diocese of Ottawa has gone one farther, and they have what I believe they call ECOPs, but what they do is they go one farther yet, because they take all of their clergy costs and put them into that central pot along with the diocesan core expenses. And then they, pardon the term, apportion it out from there. So what they're now doing is saying, this is the total cost for clergy in our diocese. And you could go farther than clergy, but this is the way Ottawa does it. The total cost for the incumbents and the curates. And now, based upon the percentage, you're paying that much. So whatever your share of the diocesan piece is, that has benefits to it. For example, it lets the bishop, for example, appoint a senior priest who has has a higher compensation package to a small parish where there's real opportunity or there's a real need. It has other challenges to it because larger parishes are going to pay a heavier share, right? Because this, again, is a balloon. When you push on one side, it comes out, the bulge goes on the other. But there is then the opportunity to talk about doing something that drives equity. The third model is picking up on the theme we've talked about from Synod and from the vision and strategy, which is encouraging mission work. And it's simplistically, you don't like to compare it this way, but it's like, the government incents you to do things based upon your taxes. So some things get a deduction and some things get a credit. And so one option is to say, look, mission work somehow is treated differently. Now, that gets into a challenge as you go to execute that, because you can get into debate about what is mission. Well, of course, our incumbent, their mileage is mission. She must be driving somewhere. That's mission. Well, what about the percentage of their time that's spent on mission work rather than planning a sermon or pastoral work or administrative? So you can, but there's complexity to that, but that's another approach. Encouraging mission work, consistent with what we're trying to do. The final one that's raised is an objective around, stretching this out longer and reducing the volatility, because some parishes see ups and downs. This can help in some ways, because for growing parishes, right, versus shrinking parishes, based on a longer term rolling average. So what that does, though, is, as you can pretty well work through, there's conflicting or there's overlying and not always lined up with each other outcomes, depending on which objective you are trying to get at. So the real focus we've tried to now put is, let's get our objective lined up, because then we can decide the best way to achieve that objective. And right now, I would also argue that as you go around, you get different feels on what the objective is. It depends by parish, depends by individual, depends by circumstance. So one of the things we did is at Synod Council, we asked just this question. You've got ranking from 1 to 5. Please rank one number per, and a write-in on the last one. So a little bit of clarity, and one of the reasons we did the ranking is because when you look at the weighted scores, so I took and said, if you gave, the highest rating, then that's going to get a weighted score if it's higher than the one you rated the bottom. The scores come out clustered pretty tightly, right? 29% went to encouraging mission work. And then the lowest one, which was volatility, was 23%. So there's a fairly tight, right? 20, because there's 4 of them there, in essence. Nobody really got another one that drew any attention. So there's 25% would be the average for each one if you just did it arithmetically. And it was spread between 29 and 23. The interesting thing, though, that came from that is when I did the analysis behind it to say, what did people rank number 1? right? So what was the frequency of a number one rating? 60% touched the encouraged mission work as their number one choice. So that's really kind of where we sit at the moment. That work was done at Synod Council. What we'd like to do tonight is get some feedback. And in fact, Mark has them in Trenton. I have them here. For those that are on the bridge, I can email them. But what I would ask is basically on a two-sided sheet of paper. On one side, I've written what you saw on the charts, the little description around each of those. And then on the other side, trying to get ranking. And there's room for a write-in for a fifth one. But what we're really trying to do is achieve to get where people sit with this. So happy to have some dialogue now. But what I'm asking is if people would take the time to complete one of these, and you can either complete it tonight and leave it, or you can email. I will send out by electronically, and you can send it back that way. And then the last thing I'd like to do on this topic is go, how do we go the next step? Because we have Synod Council, which is roughly 20 people. There are 13 or so here, and so we've got 25 to 30 people engaged in the conversation tonight. But that's a sample size of 50. And I believe we need to get a larger sample. How do we go about doing that? So sorry, you want to pass?
I have no idea what you just said.
Philip Berry once again, and I'll try to stop now, but we do need a larger sample, as Alec has just said. We also need to make sure that somehow the sample of people responding is representative of the sum of our congregations, rather than just being, for one reason or another, tending toward, if all the people who answer the survey, which is what it is, are people of one mind or more or less one mind, then somehow a lot of people might get left out. So the way we sample the respondents and the response potentially might be an issue. And I don't know if it is or not. It's just being a bit of a statistician that makes me think that we need to do that somehow.
Yeah, and I would concur with that, because again, if you get a heavy sampling from a parish that is not struggling financially or is focused on certain, you're going to get different answers than somewhere that is. Okay, well, and so I fully appreciate that. Wayne, Bishop, you want to?
Thanks, Wayne. It's Bishop Michael here. I I think that's an excellent point. And one of the things that have popped into my mind is that as part of our clergy conference that's coming up very shortly, there's a session where I have a bishop's forum where I can bring issues to the clergy that I want to bring, that I want to talk about. And I think one of the ways of being able to start with something like this, even taking that document we have tonight, it's only a 45-minute forum, so it's not a great engagement, but to be able to encourage the clergy to take that back to their parish leadership and be able to have some conversation with them, with everybody in the room around what Alec has been laying out tonight, but to get that back to the councils. Because one of the things that I found in doing the parish council visits was I think there's quite a great appetite for those kinds of engagements on our councils. I did about 32 of those visits over 2 years, but to be able to bring that back and say, here's something, so that the councils, at the very minimum, can feed back to the kind of thing we're doing there. But I want to make that part of my forum, because I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Other questions, comments, input? Because I think this is important, right? I mean, it's important from a number of dimensions, and getting the right next steps forward helps make sure we get to the right place or the best place, because I'm not sure the right and wrong depends on situation.
Helen McLaughlin from Trenton. I think we really want to take ours back to our parish council. We have differing opinions within that parish council, and there are many people who need to be heard in relation to this whole thing. So we need to take it back.
So what would be the best way to do that? Because we got a cross section of parishes represented between the rooms and the homes. What's the best way to engage at the parish level? And we have Synod Council engaged. We've got those that come out tonight engaged. We can, the bishop talked about engaging with the clergy. Those are all key points of engagement. But how do we get? Because I think, and again, my point is you've got to keep it nice and structured so that it's not a broad spread. Just send me your input. But no, we also need that, value that, but we want you to rank this because ultimately that gives you a way to get at data.
Tracy Smith, I'd like to see the wardens, treasurers, each be able to rank this. They're not necessarily the same people who are our lay delegates to synod either, but they are right in there giving so much of their hours and time trying to, make the parishes viable in mission and ministry. So I'd like to see every parish wardens and treasurers, respond to this and rank it, and that be counted.
So, and let me ask the question. You've got the microphone, Tracy, because one of the things we need, it's fine for me to send out, or John, or even the bishop to send that out, another email. But if we ask the clergy to support that and to bring it to parish council, and to bring it to their wardens more specifically, I guess in a warden to say, can we please make sure we take this seriously? Can we please invest the time to do that? Is that something that will we get most of the clergy to participate and do that?
Well, I think especially if I believe all the wardens and treasurers' emails are here.
We have
on
them
record.
All, yeah.
You have them. I believe the bishop, if he suggests to the clergy, yes, we do want to hear from these people, and he mentions it to us, we will in turn support that and mention it to our wardens. But I think, yeah, there's a good chance that you would hear from them about this.
Okay. Now, let me ask one last question then. Do we go to the level of tracking it? Do we, because there's two different ways to do it, right? One is to say, wardens and treasurers, please respond. And then you kind of send out a reminder if it says, if you haven't, please, versus the second approach, which is kind of like the income tax approach. Well, we haven't heard from you. And I'm making it specifically saying we've not had it from this warden or from this parish. Do we go that far, or do we just take the first level?
I wouldn't have a problem with it being something that we submit with our, annual report. Our regional deans ask for a copy of our annual report. We have things that we send into the diocese, and this is certainly a very good way to, voice our concerns. And yeah, I don't see a problem with that. I wouldn't feel badly at all, and I don't think my wardens would if they were asked to do this, because it is not that laborious.
It's not onerous, no. And so if we did that and we coupled it to the annual information sheet in that piece, is that a logical way to do it? Let me ask some of the other clergy in the room. We got Blair at the back and Bill. Is that? I know you're not thinking you're going to come and get asked questions like that, but hey.
Blair Peaver, Christchurch, Cataraqua. I guess it just depends on when you need the information. If you want this quickly, then I can bring it to parish council next week and have the wardens fill it out then. If you want to wait until February, that's what the next annual meeting is. It's not an onerous thing to do, so I don't think it would need to be tied to anything else we do. Just send it out.
So if we linked it to the clergy conference, and for those so in November the diocese has and the bishop hosts a clergy conference, and it's education, it's social, it's a number of things. Would that be the place for the bishop, as he indicated, to have that discussion, and then follow that saying after And we're now launching this out to your wardens, and if you could please support that coming back. Is that a reasonable approach?
I think that's a that's a reasonable approach. I guess part of the challenge I sort of see is I remember a few years ago undertaking a survey of the parishes as to how they were using their reserves. And I think we only got about 16 of the parishes to respond back, and that was with me phoning them and harassing them. You look around, you say, okay, here in Kingston, I mean, I don't know who's on the bridge, but there aren't a lot of Kingston clergy here. And if they're not prepared to engage at this point, how do we ensure that they're engaged later on? That this is an important piece of work. This can set a real positive tone in the life of our diocese. So there may have to be some loving follow-up.
God loves. Okay.
Nancy McLeod here. I would suggest, we've talked about the wardens and treasurers. I would think we would want the wardens, the treasurers, and the lay delegates to be included in that sampling and that response base. Just wondering if it might work in terms of not creating a clergy roadblock in getting the information out there. With those email lists, we have email for most of the wardens, treasurers, and lay delegates, that if it was a non-anonymous survey monkey email sent to them, that they could complete with a request that they print a have a paper copy attached that they can provide for anybody in their parish who doesn't have access to do it that way.
Hello, Alex.
That sounds like Doug Green.
Yes, I think one of the things that we would probably need to do, rather than do something of a scattergun approach, is somebody within the parish needs to take the lead on this, whether it's clergy, whether it's wardens, whether it's a treasurer or whoever. But one person has to take the lead on this and sort of follow it through. And it could be different in different parishes. It could be clergy in one parish. It could be a warden in another parish. But I think there needs to be sort of a single point of contact of getting this into the parishes, getting some answers, and then getting the information back to you.
And I think that's also important because, this is the tip of the iceberg. We're trying to get to the objective. You're then going to get into a dialogue about how do you meet that objective. So I do believe this is a tip of the iceberg discussion. Hopefully it's not a really big iceberg, but I don't think it's an ice cube either. Let me just ask, we've got Mike Rice, Christchurch, and from Madoc on the line. Mike, do you have any reflection? Senate Council delegate.
Well, Mike Rice from Christchurch and from Madoc and from Land O'Lakes and, all places north and south and east and west. Your point, I think, speaks to the fact that the information's more valuable sooner rather than later, because as you say, it just sort of sets the tone for the discussion, which will be where the hard work is, how we might achieve this with adjusting CMM. So I think to try to have the information back before Christmas is reasonable. I don't see a problem with certainly none of the parishes I'm involved with. And maybe you do it, through if you want to have somebody responsible, you do it through the regional deans, which is the last thing I really want to suggest. But at least they have more contact and can share the follow up.
Thank you. I'm just going down the line. Ada, new ministry and a new parish just started last week. What would your thought be?
Gosh, I think, as you say, the people that are working on this budget and etc., need to know sooner than later, as Mike suggested. And I think getting it to our parish councils and getting it in conversation is going to be a helpful tool for all of us. The more we can discuss this openly, the better a synod is going to go.
Okay, thank you. And I thought I heard earlier in one of the newest clergy to the diocese, did I hear Lynn in Trenton? Reverend Lynn Mitchell?
She wasn't able to attend, Alex.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard her earlier, but
She was just sort of in the beginning very briefly, and then had to leave.
Did I miss any other clergy or incumbents on the? Okay, so I think we formed a plan to get to that objective set. Is everybody comfortable then with what we're talking about this before year end? We're focused on the objective. We're focused on wardens, treasurers, the incumbent facilitating, and then realizing that again, if that's a parish council discussion you want to have, I think that's a good input as well. And then this is now building the network to go the next steps when we go next year to how do we achieve that objective. So my objective of 8:30 has passed, and I apologize for that, but I think the discussion and the dialogue has been very good. I would ask you, and so those that are on the bridge, I will send out emails, and in terms of the form, I will pass them out. Mark will pass them out in 2 locations. They can come back either paper or scanned and emailed, and you can send them back to my attention, and I will then summarize all this through. The last thing I would like to do is spend a moment reflecting on what we've, the session we've had, just feedback in terms of what, does the technology work? What might we do differently to enhance it? Is the conversation, is this the right sorts of things to be talking about? And what do we do going forward? So let me open that up as kind of the last topic.
Mike Rice, just a small point for those on the bridge. We can't see who's talking in the room. We have a lovely picture of you the whole time, Alex, but we don't see anybody else. So I don't know if there's a way to set up so that that you go to a microphone where the camera picks up who's actually speaking. Well, that's not a big deal.
No, but fair point. Now we had a PC issue in Trenton that didn't let us set a webcam there. Our plan had been to do just that with a podium, and we and that does. And there are parts. So, for example, you can see Anne and John there quite well. But as I zoom over here, Philip kind of is past that darn door that sits in the middle, and the bishop, you kind of lose. But we'll look at that for setup of the room. We'll look at the setup of the room. Yep. Thank you.
One idea about increasing the participation in our go-to meetings, should we use this in the future, and I certainly hope that we do, is especially for leading 3 congregations, is it's much easier to go to a central point when it's available. Alternatively, to do it from our homes if we have good internet. And I think some folks that I was talking with, they just weren't sure how it was going to play out as far as how do you access the go-to meeting and maybe a little demo on a YouTube video, or even just when when the meeting is about to start, it'll launch by itself and you just need to click the link type of thing. So more how to, it seems obvious perhaps to us, but I think members of our congregations, they're working it through, they want to participate and they're just not sure how to do that.
And I think that's a good suggest. We can and as we do get the technology tightened down, but absolutely doing that. And the other thing that I hope happens is that everybody goes away and says, yeah, this worked all right, this is all right.
Exactly.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
and it's not hard because there's nothing like evangelism, pardon the use of the expression, to help something go viral, to use a social term. Any other feedback or thoughts? Right balance of, because the last time we heard, and it was partly related, but we also heard clearly less material, more discussion. Is it the right kind of balance? I'm not hearing anybody say no. So I see nodding heads, but just again, try to, any other feedback? The other question is, we do this and generally it's been attached to the budget cycle, or it's been attached to pre-Synod discussions, or it was attached to vision and strategy. Is it useful to do these types of discussions more often, like to do them, someone suggest, do you do them this kind of thing more often? I'm getting nodding heads here. What's
I think
sorry?
This is Art in Trenton. Just one thing I think could maybe help out, Alec, would be if for these, I don't know if it's possible or not, but it'd be nice to have a person in each parish identified as the person, a contact for Mark and for yourself on this, because somebody needs to spread the word to the other parishes that haven't attended tonight, because maybe they're a little bit afraid of it, or just not, enthused about the topic. But these are important topics, and down the line, when people, if a new CMM comes in, they'll start to say, well, where's that based on? I wasn't involved. They had the chance. They've had to get in on the groundwork. So I think if you had a contact in every parish, whether it be the minister, or whether it be one of the wardens or the treasurer or somebody else, who could then just make those suggestions, get that advertising out there. I know Reverend Ada did a great job on at our parish council. She identified that this meeting was coming up, and sitting here in Trenton, we've got 3 of our parish. So it just needs that little push to get more people involved, because if they don't, then you say you can't cry foul, but at the same time, they will.
Thanks, Art. And I think, again, I hope it's clear. I mean, from a diocesan staff perspective, we want the input. We want the dialogue, and we want the collaboration, that we're better because there's more perspectives, more opinions, more skill, more experience built into doing what's best for the work that our diocese is called to do. So I think, again, if I'm happy to and the other thing is, we've kind of picked the topics, but I'm also happy to start saying, let's identify what we'll have another session on, I don't know, 3rd week of January, and please have your topics in a week before, and we'll pick the 3 or 4 that we can get at. Okay. So unless anyone has any other comments or input, this is an opportunity, I think, for us to see how the technology works, because we'll see if we can all pray the grace together, recognizing that we have slight time delays because of the internet and all the things we do. But normally, at a meeting, we will stand and link hands and say the grace. We can now do that virtually. And Bishop, if you would lead us.
Just before I lead you in the grace, and we're standing here and about to link hands electronically and in real time and all other ways, I just want to extend my deep thanks and appreciation to everybody who came out tonight and participated in this. Your work in the life of our church is invaluable. Thank you, and look forward to future engagement. So as we pray together, the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit
fellowship of the
be
Holy
with us
Spirit,
all
with us
evermore.
all, evermore. Amen.